Okay, hi. So I'm just have to talk over my bird. It's kind of being really finicky right now. And it only chirps when I start talking, so just bear with me please. This is the fourth time I've tried to record this with my bird making noise. So I'm going to just try to quickly go through. The first time I filmed this, I went very detailed into why I did not like the book I chose to read. And why I couldn't finish it, and I had to delete it. It said the file was too large, so I tried to make it smaller. It was almost an hour long. It was like a minute shy of being an hour long. So let's just start with characters. There are 8 main characters. Really, there's 4 main characters, but 8 that really play a bigger role in the story. So Nina, Caleb, Nathaniel, and Patrick are the main characters. So I struggled to read this book really because it was revealed in the prologue why or what happened to the priest, and then it turns out that the wrong person was killed. And this book isn't very long. It's only 351 pages. That's not a problem for anybody that's dedicated to reading books of that size. So let's dive into plot. So this book follows the story of Nina and Caleb and their son Nathaniel. One morning, as Nina wakes up her son from school, she notices that he peed the bed, which isn't unusual because he's like 5 and hasn't been potty trained for really that long at all. So she and him compromise into getting him into semi-clean clothes, and she sends him off to school. A few minutes later, she receives a call from the teacher that's saying Nathaniel is portraying violent and destructive behavior to his classmates. So that's like the beginning of the story, and when we present the real issue of why Nathaniel's not talking. So Nathaniel is taken to a pediatrician for an ultrasound of his neck to see if there are any visible growths or anything that's making talking hard or painful. And the tests come back fine. He's fine. Nathaniel is sent to a child psychiatrist where he's seen showing the main signs of sexual assault. When he's holding a doll in his lap and he has it like face down and he's pushing a crown like into its butt. That's which is sad. Like that breaks the heart of the reader, and that's what draws them in. They want to see Nathaniel get peace, and they want to see him start being his normal self again. So Nina goes to get Nathaniel examined by a doctor, and the sexual abuse is confirmed. Since he still won't communicate, Nina begins to teach him basic sign language, which Caleb protests. His reason's actually pretty good, because he knows that Nina will do whatever is necessary to get Nathaniel to say who did this to him. So he's basically just like, how many words are you going to have to teach him in this language before you can get him to tell you who did this to him? And Nina's like, have I really been that transparent that he knows my motives before I even do that? And so, like, I think Nina should have just given Nathaniel time, like literally everybody was telling her, give Nathaniel time, he'll get out of his funk, and he does. So when Nina and Nathaniel go to the next visit with Dr. Robichaud, which is the psychiatrist, Nathaniel signs father. Immediately Nina just thinks that he wants Caleb, his dad, because he's not there with them, he's at work. So Nathaniel, that's the second time I've done that. Nathaniel is not a name. Nathaniel is too busy being zoned out on the book when Nina asks him, like, do you just want your father? Is that why you signed father? Which she should have known wasn't Caleb, but she thought he was the one that molested Nathaniel because he signed father. But Nathaniel doesn't call his dad father, he calls him daddy. So that, like, and Nina even says that later in the book. She's like, I should have known it wasn't him because that's not what Nathaniel calls him. He doesn't call him father. So, Nina confronts Caleb and he spends the night in a hotel. A few pages later into the next chapter, Patrick comes over, which is Nina's best friend. They grew up all together, went to college together. And this is where Nathaniel finds his voice again. Because Patrick distracts Nathaniel while Nina and Caleb are arguing about the progress Nathaniel has made, which is really little to none at this point. And so Nathaniel climbs up onto the couch next to Patrick and leans over into his ear and whispers, Father Glenn. And Patrick's basically just like, who the heck is Father Glenn? Who is this man? This has to be who did it, because this child that has not been speaking for the past week just whispered an ID to me of the person that did this. So Patrick decides to go to the church and kind of sneak around and see what he can find. And on accident he stumbles into a classroom, and the teacher asks him what he's doing. He just quickly makes up an excuse and said, "Hey, my child had an accident. I'm just looking for something to change them into." And he's shown towards a Goodwill box, and so he takes it with him and goes into the custodial closet, because Nina had told him that when he came home on the Sunday of the incident, he was in different underwear, which she wasn't too concerned about at the time. She thought maybe he just had an accident and they just changed him to get him out of those clothes. When he came home, he was in a cheap store-bought pair. And so even though Patrick doesn't find Nathaniel's underwear in the custodial closet in the box he's looking through, he just takes a quick look around the room and he finds something bright stuff behind the boiler and the wall, the alcove, it says in the book. So he gets a fire prodder stick thing and he uses that to drag the bag out, and inside the bag is Nathaniel's underwear with a stiff stain off the left side of the seam on the back. So Patrick detains Father Sadzinski for having criminal evidence in his church, and they do blood tests and bodily fluid tests, and it matches the DNA in Nathaniel's underwear. So when Patrick tells Nina what he's found, she's like, "Wow, I feel like a fool. I just went to confession a few days ago to talk about what happened with the priest, the only person at this point I really know to trust. And he dared talk to me about forgiveness, sorry." The priest doesn't admit anything during interrogation, but Patrick does ask him when he had time to be alone with Nathaniel, and he says never, except for after church, when he reads a story to the kids while the parents socialize. But Patrick's like, "Well, how could you get Nathaniel alone if all these other kids are allegedly present?" Turns out that Nathaniel stumbled into the office. Like, he went to the office, let me see if I can find it in the book real quick. Sorry, I didn't end up finding the passage, but one of the main things that made me not want to read this book was how Nina started acting like the victim after she shot Father Glenn, in trial when she was detained for murder. I found this blog that I'll leave the link to down below. It says, "I don't know if Nina should have killed the molester. I don't even know if I'd be able to. I don't have kids, but I'd like to think that I could control myself without violence." Honestly, yeah. So I've just jotted down a few pages of examples I'd like to go over of just like Nina going crazy. And this is my second time trying to read this book. The first time I just could not get through it because the way Nina started acting started to drive me crazy. But she's basically like, she says in this book, "I've seen people that are insane come to trial, and I know how to act to get away with murder on insanity, and I just don't think that that's right at all." She does end up getting away with murder. Her charge is dropped to manslaughter, and she's sentenced to 20 years, but it's excused or suspended or whatever. And so Nina basically just starts to act crazy because she knows that if she acts a certain way, she can just pass off whatever she did and go back to her son and claim some kind of moral right because she killed the person that did this to her son, which I don't agree with at all. I don't think one act of violence constitutes another ever in any situation. And on page 144 at the bottom, she says, "Nervousness can pass for crazy." So even though Nina thinks that she did this for her son, she really honestly did it for herself. She didn't have to shoot Father Glenn to get her revenge. She just could have waited for trial. And even Caleb says that. He's like, Father Glenn was about to go on trial, and you could have just waited. And he's just like, I almost dropped my book in the floor. He says, you know, he would have gotten his sentence. He would have got what's coming to him. And Nina's like, no, it wouldn't have been enough. I did what I did, and I did the right thing. And Caleb's like, no, you didn't. And she's like, Nathaniel deserves this. And and Caleb's like, no one deserves this. So at this point, people are starting to kind of see through her act of delusion and faked insanity. And Patrick, he calls her on it, and he's like, Nina, just stop, because I know what you're doing, and it's not gonna work. He says, I feel bad for taking you home when Caleb wouldn't come get you because of what I said to you the night in the bar they go to. He said people like that ought to be shot, and he thinks that that's why Nina did what she did, that she took what he said a little too literally, and that now this has just happened. My next note says 152 to 153, read them. I guess. Oh yeah, this is the scene where Caleb says that no one deserves this. So in the book, it goes on to say that there is no difference in degrees in murder in Maine, that you can, the mandatory sentence is 25 years to life, which means if I'm to be acquitted, I have to be not guilty, difficult to prove given the act is on film, and I promise I can read, I promise. Not guilty by reason of insanity or under the influence of extreme anger brought on by adequate provocation. Hope I'm saying that right. So you can just pass off murder as a insanity or be extreme anger. Nina knew exactly what she was doing, and she even says that she's acting crazy because that's what she wants them to see. My next note is page 164. I didn't read this whole book, so I don't have notes to the whole end, but I did look up the ending of the book just so we could kind of talk about it. Alright, this is the scene in the funeral. She has such anger and hatred toward Father Zazinski. I don't know why she would go to his funeral. Which says, when I turn, my gaze falls on the front left pew, where a woman in black is bent over at the waist, sobbing so hard she cannot catch her breath. Her iron gray curls wilt beneath her black cloche hat. Cloche? I'm pretty sure it's cloche. Her hands are knotted so tightly around the edge of the pew, I think she may splinter the wood. The priest who is giving me communion whispers to another clergyman who takes over as he goes to comfort her. And that is when it hits me. Father Zazinski was someone's son too. My chest fills with lead and my legs melt beneath me. I can tell myself that I have gotten retribution from Nathaniel. I can say that I was morally right. But I cannot take away the truth that another mother has lost her child because of me. Is it right to close one cycle of pain if it only opens up another one? No. Because like I said, one act of violence doesn't constitute another. At this point, Nina starts to try to act like... I'm sorry, I just woke up. Just a few minutes ago, I just woke up. Nina tries to start acting like the victim, and I'm just like, no, you are not the victim. So, on page 168, someone finally puts their foot down, and it says that Nina is not exempt from the law. So, this is Quentin, someone they brought in to work the case, and it says, there was semen, Patrick says, on her son's underwear. Yes, Quentin rifles through some more pages. Where's the DNA on that? At the lab, but she'll be back this week. Quentin's head comes up slowly. She didn't even see the DNA results on the underwear before she shot the guy. Also jumps along Patrick's jaw. Nathaniel told me, her son, he made a verbal ID. My 5-year-old nephew tells me the tooth fairy is the one who brought him a buck, but that doesn't mean I believe him, Lieutenant. And then Patrick basically says, you don't know Nathaniel, and you have no right to question my professional judgment. And Quentin stands up, towering over the detective. I have every right, because reading your file on the investigation, it sure looks to me like you messed up simply because you were giving a DA who jumped to conclusions, special treatment, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let you do that again while we prosecute her. She didn't jump to conclusions, Patrick argued. She knew exactly what she was doing. She did. She knew exactly what she was doing. Quentin... Yeah. So Patrick says, Christ, if it were my kid, I would have done the same thing. Both of you listen to me. Nina Frost is a murder suspect. I don't know why she's a suspect. They saw her do it. She made the choice to commit a criminal act. She killed a man in cold blood in front of a courtroom of people. Your job is to uphold laws, and no one gets to bend those to their own advantage. Not even a district attorney. Yeah, so I'm glad finally someone puts their foot down, which doesn't benefit because Nina still gets off. Because she's found with reasonable anger. Page 170. This is where Nina's talking to Caleb. Caleb is stacking wood in the basement and Nina comes down and he's like tense around her now, knowing that she perfectly calculated what she did and then carried it out without hesitation. He says, are you going... Yeah, he says, this might have been Nina talking, are you going back out again? Because I need to go to the hardware store to get that tarp. He doesn't need a tarp. He has 4 of them stored in the garage. He does not even know why those words have flown from his mouth, like birds desperate to escape through a chimney flue. And yet he keeps speaking. Can you watch Nathaniel? Nina goes still in front of his eyes. Of course I can watch Nathaniel. Or do you think I'm too unstable to take care of him? I didn't mean it like that. You did, Caleb. You may not want to admit it, but you did. She murdered someone, and she is trying to play the victim role. She wasn't the one that was molested. She wasn't the one that was shot. She's not a victim here. Okay, page 174 is my next note. Oh, this is another example of where she's acting insane. So, my language makes a blush rise above the collar of his button-down shirt. Miss Frost. Nina, I need to ask you some questions about the day that everything happened. I start to pull out the sleeves of my turtleneck. Not a lot, just so that the fabric covers my hands. I look into my lap. I had to do it, I whisper. I'm getting so good at this. Nina's driving me nuts. That's the reason I couldn't finish the book. Nina was making me mad. How were you feeling that day? Dr. Starro asked. Doubt ices his voice. Just moments ago, I was perfectly lucid. I had to do it. You understand? I've seen this thing happen too many times. I couldn't lose him to this. I closed my eyes, thinking of every successful insanity defense I've ever heard proposed to a court. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't have stopped myself. It was like I was watching someone else do it, someone else reacting. And the doctor's like, but you knew what you were doing. Dr. Starr replies, and I have to catch myself before my head snaps up. You've prosecuted people who have done horrible things. And then Nina says, I didn't do a horrible thing. I saved my son. Isn't that what mothers are supposed to do? Yes, but no, if it comes to murdering someone. Okay, page 1, next page. She finds Peter in the store and Nathaniel calls him over, but one of her agreements to her bell is she can't talk to anybody that works at her district, and she does in the store, and someone else, who is it? Quentin, the one that was brought in to work on her case, sees her in the store with Peter talking to Nathaniel, so Nina gets arrested and Peter takes Caleb home, and this is the point that Nathaniel goes back to signing, and on page 181 Caleb tries to call the psychiatrist, Dr. Robichaud, and she doesn't answer, so he hangs up, balls his hand into a fist, and punches a hole in the wall. That's cliche male anger. My next note that I jotted, these are just basic points that I wanted to like kind of talk about. Okay, so on page 185 is a creepy and unnecessary scene between the priest and Nathaniel, and I just feel like the reader doesn't have to be traumatized along with the characters in the book to feel bad for them. Like, I don't have to be molested, and thank God I haven't ever been molested, in order to feel bad for Nathaniel, because he's a child and these things shouldn't happen to children or adults. These rape, molestation, those are things that shouldn't happen to anybody, ever. So at that point, I'm just like, I'm not going to finish this book. I don't like it. It's written well, I just don't like it. So I looked up the end of the book. And it later turned out that Nina had in fact killed the wrong person, and a visiting priest named Father Gwyn had molested Nathaniel. Oh my gosh, I said it again. Nathaniel. That's two counts of saying that. Nathaniel. Fathers Gwyn and Szynski shared the same DNA in their blood because Father Szynski had a bone marrow transplant from Father Gwyn, because they're half-brothers, and that is what led to the belief that the semen found in the underwear belonged to Szynski. Although this fact was made known at Nina's own court trial for murder, after the jury could not reach a verdict, the judge ruled that her reasons were justified, and therefore she was found not guilty of murder. However, using a main clause, she was found guilty of manslaughter, because the judge believed she was under the influence of reasonable fear or anger brought about by reasonable provocation, and sentenced to 20 years in jail, but it is suspended. In a final twist at the end, Nina's best friend and colleague, Patrick Durcharm, with whom she's had a very brief affair during a brief split with her husband Caleb, moves away, and Nina discovers that Caleb is the one that poisoned Father Gwyn, despite his earlier protest to her killing Szynski. Okay, so Nina killed the wrong guy, for one. Patrick and Nina had an affair, and then he moved away. And one more thing I wanted to mention, swearing in a book is such a turn-off to me. I like, if it's in the dialogue of the character and it's rare, that's okay, but I really just don't like swearing in books. Or in general, really. So, I have these 3 books by the same author, which I probably won't go on to read them. I think this one deals with, just for reading the back, I think this deals with abortion. It probably doesn't. Because the last line, like, the child in the book is born with an illness, and the last line of the book says, what constitutes a valuable life? And this was, I guess, read by Stephen King, because on the front it says, Picoult writes with unassuming brilliance by, like Stephen King. So, I don't know. If you like books that err on the side of more sensitive topics, then I do recommend these books for you. If not, then you're like me, you don't mind sensitive topics, so just not your favorite to read about. I don't think anybody likes to read about rape or molestation. I just don't like these books, and I will catch you in the next one.